which is, it sounds kind of like mitosis. I wish they had given it a more distinct name. And I've heard this pronounced as meiosis. I pronounce it as meiosis. It sounds like mitosis. It is a cell cycle, but it's very different than the mitosis cell cycle. So we start off with I guess a PG-13 slide, little bugs having fun there. We have a egg cell in the process of being fertilized by sperm. So when we deal with meiosis, we're dealing with a cell cycle. We're dealing with basically reproduction, the formation of the sperm and the egg. We're dealing with basically cell division, but not like mitosis, right? And we're going to compare and contrast those two as we get through this lecture. So the purpose of meiosis is to form egg and sperm cells, right? In ladies, the production of eggs. In males, the production of sperm. So this is different from mitosis. Mitosis is to make exact copies, exact duplicate replication of the cell that we began with, right? Mitosis is for identical copies. Meiosis is for the production of genetic diversity, right? We don't want clones. We don't want exact copies. We want to make differences, right? And that's the purpose for this cellular cycle of meiosis. So this is the opposite of asexual reproduction. So meiosis produces the egg and sperm, which then allow for sexual reproduction to happen. So that's, again, a big deal. In this sort of picture, right, we start with a cell. We have a chromosome in blue, chromosome in red. There they've replicated. We're going to have now a transfer. This is a very critical stage. We're going to talk about crossing over. So basically, we have one cell now with one blue, one red. Right? We're going to divide the cell once and twice without replicating the DNA again. So we're going to end up with half of the original genetic material. And we see it's been merged, right? So it's not just blue. Now it's got blue with red. Now it's got red with blue. So these are going to help to generate our genetic diversity, which is going to help to not make clones, to increase differences. And that's the whole point of meiosis. I'm going to use a little bit of vocabulary here. When we deal with mitosis, right? Mitosis, we deal with somatic cells, diploid cells. So all body cells except the gametes. So a heart cell, a skin cell, a kidney cell, a brain cell, any cell that has two sets of chromosomes. Diploid, two, right? Two sets of chromosomes, 2N, algebraically speaking here, right? So we have two sets because we got one set from mom, one set from dad. And that's, again, the somatic or diploid cell. All body cells except for the gametes. Well, the gametes are the egg and sperm cells, right? They're going to have only one set of chromosomes. So if you're male, they're only going to have the male set. If you're female, they're only going to have the female set. So the haploid situation, right? Kind of half of 2 is 1, right? So half of 2N is only 1N. So gametic cells. So gametic cells equals sperm in males. Gametic cell equals egg in females. Now the number of chromosomes, this number 2N varies from sort of organism to organism. So for mosquitoes, 2N will equal 6. So there's again, number of chromosome pairs. So they get 3 from mom, 3 from dad. So mosquitoes have a total of 6 chromosomes. Flies have a total of 12. So N equals 6, N equals 3. Alligators, so N equals 16, 2N equals 32. Now we come down here to humans. So the human haploid number is 23. So there's 23 chromosomes in the sperm, 23 chromosomes in the egg. So when sperm and egg unite in fertilization, N plus N, 23 plus 23 equals 46. So you will have to know those numbers for your exam. So the haploid number of 23 which means our diploid number is 46. So we're right in between wheat and potatoes, which is kind of weird there, right? But the chromosome number of different species. So just to kind of show it like this, right? This is this example of the mosquito, right? So this is a mosquito example. So 3 haploid chromosomes come from the male, 3 haploid chromosomes come from the female. In fertilization, now we have 1 cell, 1 diploid zygote, that first fertilized cell, with a total of 6, 3 greens, 3 purples. Right? In humans, it's the same thing that happens. So let's start here, right? So we are the first little cell we develop by the process of mitosis, growth and development. So we mature at puberty. Mitosis is still happening. We're still repairing our somatic cells, but now the reproductive organs become functional, right? So the ovaries start ovulating, testes start producing sperm. So we have then the haploid sperm, haploid egg that can fertilize, and we get a new genetically different combination of a diploid. So 23 plus 23, n plus n equals 2n, 46. So this is what happens again in humans. Now, mitosis will occur throughout our whole life, right? If it doesn't, we break down, we fall apart. Meiosis is different, and I'll get into some details, but meiosis is kind of selfish. Meiosis only exists to keep the species alive. Mitosis exists to keep the individual alive. So that's, again, a good test question there. Mitosis for growth and repair. We get damaged our whole life. We have to continue to repair our injuries, but we're not necessarily reproductive our whole lives, right? And that, again, gives us a big difference in the functionality of meiosis versus mitosis. I thought that was interesting, right? Right? So what is the purpose of meiosis? To reduce the chromosome number in half, to go from a diploid condition of the somatic cell to the haploid condition of the gametes. How does this happen? The nucleus will divide 2 times, 2 consecutive divisions, not giving that cell time to replicate the DNA. So in mitosis, we go from 1 cell to 2. In meiosis, we go from 1 cell to 4. So again, this is a big difference, contrasting mitosis from meiosis. We'll get into this a little bit later with genetics here, right? But just to kind of show you some pictures, right? So we have meiosis. Meiosis, since we're going to divide twice, we're going to talk about prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1, and then prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2, right? So it's the same phases of mitosis, but they happen twice, and different things happen in meiosis. One big difference here in meiosis 1, in prophase 1, is this idea of crossing over, right? So the chromosomes from mom and dad kind of sort of get close together, and we call that synapsis. So mom and dad's chromosomes kind of get into close proximity, and maybe like you with your significant other, you're walking in the mall, maybe you're holding hands, you know, you're not walking far apart, you get close together, and then you hold hands, or maybe you put your arm over their shoulder or around their waist or something, right? So the chromosomes do something very similar. So they synapse, they come close together, and then they cross over. Now, it gets a little bit, you know, the analogy kind of falls apart here a little bit, but imagine that, like, you're holding hands with your significant other, and then their hand breaks off and connects to you, and your hand breaks off and connects to them. So there's a literal sort of breaking and recombining. So then basically you're not 100% you anymore. You're you, but you have now your significant other's hand, and vice versa, or something like that, right? So these chromosomes literally break those phosphate sugar backbones of DNA break, and then they reconnect, right? So ensuring that we have genetic variation, right? This is very critical in the evolutionary process. So again, we have synapsis, the crossing over event, and now we have genetically different chromosomes. Now, this is important for many reasons, right? So first of all, I think it makes life interesting. It would be very boring if we were all clones like bees or ants. It keeps life interesting to see variation, right? So here we have a picture of a family. So we have mom and dad, and we have multiple sisters and brothers here, right? So if you analyze your family, maybe you have a small family or maybe you have a large family, but assuming, we're not talking about step brother, step sister, or, half sibling or adopted sibling. If they're biologically your siblings, as far as you know, yeah. So biologically your siblings, why do you look a little bit different? Right? We have some similarities here, but we have some differences, right? So none of the kids look exactly like each other, and none of the kids look exactly like either parent. And this is caused by the process of genetic recombination, crossing over, meiosis, prophase 1, all of that helps to generate new combinations. Some of the new combinations are going to be good. They're going to end up with very healthy individuals. Sometimes the genetic recombinations end up with flaws. There's children born with certain birth defects or certain genetic diseases that are amplified with these crossing over events. So it's kind of like a gamble, but that is what evolution works on, right? Genetic variation. And that's what sociology works upon, right? Your significant other, you select your significant other based on what they look like, right? Your orientation, do you like certain phenotypes, certain physical characteristics? Well, all of this is made possible again by the genetic variations caused by meiosis, right? So again, same concept, prophase 1, we have that crossing over that took place, crossing over. Metaphase 1, we align in the center. Anaphase 1, we separate the homologous chromosomes apart. Telophase 1, and we jump back, showing you again the interphase, prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1. We jump from anaphase directly into prophase in this example. But prophase 1, metaphase, I should say prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2, and then we end up with our 4 cells. Right? So no 2 cells are alike as a result of crossing over. So we notice every chromosome is a little bit different than the other cell, right? So that is the goal of meiosis. So I like this picture. So we have, you can see our 4 cells, cell 1, 2, 3, and 4. Cytokinesis will complete the separation of the cytoplasm, and we end up with our 4 haploid gametic cells here. So again, this will separate to end up with 1, 2, 3, 4 haploid cells. So I promise you many test questions on this slide right here, right? Contrasting meiosis from mitosis. So in mitosis, DNA replication occurred once, but it doesn't happen again after the second division, right? How many divisions do we have in mitosis? Only 1. That cytokinesis happens only 1 time. Meiosis cytokinesis can happen twice to end up with 4 cells. Synapsis does not occur in mitosis. Synapsis does occur in meiosis, and we have then crossing over. The final products of mitosis, 2 identical cells. We start with somatic, we end up with somatic in mitosis. We start with diploid, we end up with diploid. In meiosis, we end up with 4. So we started with somatic, we end up with gametic. We start with diploid, we end up with haploid. We started with 1 cell, we end up with 4. And they're all different cells here, right? Roles in the body, mitosis was for growth and for repair. Meiosis is for the production of sperm and egg, which then allow for genetic recombination, sexual reproduction, and genetic diversity, right? So that's a very, very critical, important distinction there. Now, I've been kind of doing like an umbrella, generalistic type of discussion on meiosis, but there are some major differences in the meiotic process in males versus females, right? So it's meiosis, but sometimes we call this gametogenesis, the formation of the gametes, the production of the sex cells. So in males, we're going to start with one functional cell, and we're going to end up with 4 functional haploids, right? And I'll come back to the slide. Let me show you here, right? So in the male situation, we start with one diploid cell. We undergo meiosis, division 1, division 2, and we end up with 4 functional sperm. So one that we start with, we end up with 4 functional sperm. So it's a numbers game. It's a quantity game, right? Ladies, you're different, right? Ladies are going to select quality over quantity. So we start with one egg. It undergoes division, but we have an unequal splitting, right? So one cell gets more cytoplasm, gets more organelles, gets more nutrients, and stays bigger. And the other one stays very small. Since it stayed small, it can't do much, right? It cannot be fertilized. We're going to divide the secondary oocyte again. One cell gets more nutrition, more organelles, more cytoplasm. So at the end, yes, we do have 4 cells. Ladies, 1, 2, 3, 4. But you have one large functional ovum and 3 non-functional polar bodies. So again, quality over quantity for ladies. For males, quantity over quality, right? So that's going to be a big distinction. And it kind of makes sense. It should make sense. Ladies, you have more investment of energy. Again, when the little fetus is developing, it's developing inside mom's body, right? When it's growing, it's going to put pressure and stress on mom's body. When the baby's born, mom's body is sort of programmed to provide nutrition for the child. You have to nurse the child. Dad's role is kind of limited, right? So for the males, as long as they reproduce, right? It sounds kind of bad, but in the evolutionary system, the male's goal is to sort of provide the sperm for fertilization. The females have a very unequal task of sort of developing, raising the child, nursing the child. And it does make sense then that ladies, you're going to go through all that hassle, that you put more effort into basically developing a more functional, better quality egg to begin with, right? And then it should go beyond that, right, ladies? Then you have to be very selective, because again, the sperm that fertilizes your child, if you elect to have a child, you have say you can select which partner you're going to allow then for fertilization. So again, that's why ladies typically are much more picky, and we say females are the selective sex. So we talk about this early with DNA. The males are battling, but it's the females then that get to select. And again, it does have a profound effect, because again, all of the energetic investment that goes into developing the child is quite profound for females. Now, there's a timing difference as well, right? Ladies, you are very efficient. So ladies, before you are born, while you're developing, this process has already occurred. So ladies, by the time you're born, all of your eggs are already present. So at birth, all of the eggs that you're going to have for potential ovulation are already present there, right? And again, we did 1 fertile egg and 3 non-fertile polar bodies per meiotic event. Males are not born with all the sperm present. Males don't even start to produce sperm until they reach puberty. So males are about 13 years behind, right? They always say females develop before males, faster than males. We're slow in the process of producing sperm. So males begin late, but they produce sperm throughout the rest of their life, right? And it's not a good mental image, but if you can imagine the testes of an 80-year-old man, right? Bad example, yeah. But the 80-year-old testes are still undergoing meiosis, still producing sperm. Not as effective as when they were 20 years old, but they're still undergoing this process, right? So I don't know if you Google the age of the oldest male that naturally fathered a child. I bet it's about 80 or maybe even older, right? And it makes sense. How can an old man still have a child? Well, because they just have to produce a tiny sperm and the sperm has to fertilize the egg. And that's the end of the male's energetic investment. Yeah. That would not make sense for a female to have birth at 80, right? It's too much strain on her body. So ladies, you have a reproductive window, right? You started early, right? The eggs were made early. Ovulation begins at puberty, but you don't ovulate for the rest of your life, right? You're going to reach a point midlife where you run out of eggs because you're not making more. You had what you were born with, but then they are, each cycle you ovulate until you have no more eggs to ovulate. That's what we call menopause. Biologically speaking, evolutionarily speaking, it makes sense, right? You don't want to be stressing the body, ladies, to have pregnancy and labor, and it's just too harsh on the body at a late age. So this is sort of Mother Nature's way of saying, nope, this is the end of the time when it's healthy for the female to have a child. So again, very, very different strategies in the female and male meiotic processes there.